high school. And I lost touch with her, and I've only in recent years found out where she is and what happened to her. But you know, I was faced with having to take the looks and personality of a particular person and extrapolate what I thought she might have turned out like. And yeah, but in that development of her character, I took characteristics from several other girls that I knew in the 60s.
You cover the Kennedy assassination.
Mm-hmm.
Did you really have an opportunity to?
I did, yes. Greg in the book does not actually, he is involved from the editorial point of view.
He's removed.
He's removed.
Yeah.
In actuality, I went to Dallas that day.
Did you really?
I was a reporter in Arlington, and they called and said, you know, Kennedy's been shot, get to Dallas as fast as you can. And I was fairly green. I hadn't been on the paper but maybe 3 months at the time. So I didn't do anything very significant. But I guess my claim to fame in that whole thing is that Lee Harvey Oswald was a classmate of mine in the 2nd grade.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
The world is very small,
yes,
they say.
Yes, it is, yes. And I wrote a little first-person piece for the paper about the fact that I'd known Lee Harvey Oswald in the 2nd grade, but there wasn't much you could say. He was just another kid, and there wasn't. I mean, you would not have said this kid is going to be an assassin someday or anything like that. But
he was a whack job in the
yeah,
2nd grade. No,
right.
That's not something you'd ever say.
Right, right. He was just an average kid, pretty much. He was a little bigger than most of the kids in the class because he was about a year older. I think he started to school late or something like that. But he was kind of regarded as not a bully, but kind of a tough guy, kind of a a strong. You didn't want to pick a fight with him, or something like that.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like to be in Dallas in the midst of all that? I mean, it just must have been a turmoil.
Well, I can remember my partner from the Star-Telegram Arlington Bureau and I drove over together. And I remember when we passed through the toll gate on the old Dallas-Fort Worth Turnpike, when we got to the Dallas toll gate, we heard on the radio that Kennedy had died. We knew he'd been shot, but we didn't know much else. And we drove in to Dealey Plaza, and people were still milling around there. I mean, it was still not crowded, but there were just a lot of people still milling around, just dazed. I mean, there was just this sense of, I can't believe what just happened. And I remember walking, when we got out of the car, I went to the county court, the criminal courts building, to make some phone calls and so forth. And walking down the street to the criminal courts building, I passed this old black man, and he was just shaking his head and saying something like, "Oh, the dark days are here. The dark days are here." Just saying that over and over.
Wow.
So, and I ended up at the police station that afternoon when they brought Oswald in, and I got a glimpse of him as he was being moved to an interrogation room, and he just passed with a bunch of officers around him real fast. And then the Star-Telegram had appointed somebody to sort of be in charge of our coverage over there. And he said, "Everybody, let's get together and decide what we're going to do." And he started giving people assignments and everything. And I didn't get one. I mean, I was, like I said, I was 23 years old, just out of college. And so I figured, well, this has been my adventure, and that's as far as it's going. So I got in the car and went home.
But to have been that close, I mean, one of the things about the press business, the media business, is that you do have a different kind of access than the general public does have.
Sure.
And I think that you reflected that in what you had Greg doing when he was, giving assignments to people and sending them out. I mean, the way that you picture and use the newspaper business, I thought in the novel, was very effective. And I think that gives an insider perspective to people.
Well, one of the things I wanted to show later in the book, after Greg has been through this therapy and is doing better, is that he has a couple of things that come up that sort of test whether he's going to be okay or not.
Right.
And one of them was that there was an outbreak of tornadoes in the Panhandle, and he had to manage the coverage of that. And that was very stressful, but he made it. He did okay, and that was sort of the maybe he's going to make it kind of thing.
Well, and nice symbolism. I mean, here is this raging tornado outbreak, the storms, and he's been going through that kind of thing in his mind. And so the juxtaposition of the two images I thought was really effective.
Well, thank you.
We're running out of time.
Okay.
What would you like for the reader to leave with when they finish reading It Takes a Worried Man?
Well, as I said, I'd like them to have a little better understanding of people with anxiety disorders. I point out in the beginning of the book that about 18 million Americans suffer from some sort of anxiety disorder, and I'd like for people to be a little more aware that it could be anybody. You know, it affects a lot of people, and many people know somebody if they haven't suffered it themselves. I'd like to make people more aware of anxiety disorders, but also I'd like to tell a good story and entertain people, and that's the vehicle for making people more aware.
Well, I think you did that. Now, do you have a website?
I do. www.philvinson.com.
What will we find there?
Well, you'll find information about the 3 books that I've done. I've got a new book that's just out from TCU Press, which is a collection of my photographs of Fort Worth, called Fort Worth: A Personal View. You can learn about that. You can learn about It Takes a Worried Man, and you can learn about Ink in the Blood, my memoir. So, and you can read excerpts and so forth. It's or reviews are there, and little biographical information about me.
Is there something else in the works after this latest book?
I'm trying to put together a sequel to It Takes a Worried Man, taking Greg and Susie into a time when married life and family life is their biggest issue, and see how they do after all this.
It's interesting that most of the fiction writers talk about seeing their characters and their characters being as real as you and I are, and that's an interesting process. Do you miss Susie and Greg when you're not writing about them?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And I've been away from them now for 6 months or so, and once I started working on this new idea, I thought, boy, it's good to be back with these people again.
You almost wanted to say, hi, it's good to see you.
Yeah,
I've missed you.
Right.
Well, Phil, it's been such a pleasure to meet and talk with you today. Thank you for joining us here on Books in Review.
It's been my pleasure.
If you're looking for a fascinating read from a person that you know really knows the newspaper business, knows about Galveston and the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you will thoroughly enjoy It Takes a Worried Man by Phil Vinson. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you learned something that you didn't know before. We'll see you next time.